before I tell you what happened this Christmas. I need you to imagine finding out the person you love most has been living a double life. Would you stay, or walk away? Tell me in the comments, I'll read every one. I used to believe that Christmas was the one time of year when everything made sense. The lights, the music, the smell of cinnamon candles, it all wrapped life's little imperfections into something beautiful. My husband, Mark, and I had been married for 11 years, and every December, he'd go overboard decorating our little colonial-style house in Pennsylvania. He said it reminded him of his childhood, and honestly, I loved that about him. This year, though, something felt different. Mark had been distant. His phone was always face down. He'd started working late, end-of-year accounting, he said, even though he wasn't an accountant. He managed a local hardware store, and that store closed at 6 p.m. every night. Still, I didn't question it too much. I trusted him. We'd been through a lot together, losing my dad, struggling with infertility, finally adopting our daughter, Sophie. I thought we were solid. It was December 21st when the first crack appeared. That evening, I was wrapping Sophie's presents while she watched a Christmas movie in the living room. Mark had texted me earlier, might be late tonight, inventory count. But around 7:30, Sophie said something that made me freeze mid-wrap. Mommy, Daddy said we can't tell you about the other tree. I looked up. What tree, baby? She tilted her head, frowning. The one with the silver ornaments. The one at Daddy's other house. My hands went cold. What do you mean, honey? What other house? Sophie shrugged and turned back to the screen, clearly losing interest. The one with the lady and the little boy. They had cookies. I wanted to laugh, to brush it off as a child's imagination. But my daughter wasn't the type to make up stories. I told myself she must have seen something on TV or mixed up her dreams with reality. Still, the words other house clung to me like a burr. When Mark came home that night, smelling faintly of aftershave and snow, I tried to act normal. How was inventory? I asked. He sighed, rubbing his neck. Long. We're still short-staffed. I nodded, pretending to believe it. But something in his tone, too casual, too rehearsed, made my stomach twist. That night, while he showered, I glanced at his phone on the nightstand. I'd never snooped before. But that night, my hand moved on its own. I opened the Messages app. Nothing. The texts were clean, too clean. No thread longer than a week. No late-night emojis. It was like he'd scrubbed everything. I felt ridiculous, standing there in my Christmas pajamas, holding his phone like a guilty teenager. I put it down before he came out. But sleep didn't come easy that night. The next day, Sophie and I went shopping for groceries. We were in line at Target when I noticed something odd. Mark's truck parked across the lot. I almost texted him, but curiosity got the better of me. I told Sophie we were playing a spy game and followed from a distance. He wasn't alone. He was standing outside a coffee shop, laughing with a woman I didn't recognize. She was younger, maybe early 30s, with long dark hair and a red scarf. Mark handed her something wrapped in tissue paper. Then she leaned in and kissed his cheek. My heart didn't just drop. It shattered. I couldn't confront him there, not in front of Sophie. So I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. That evening, I asked him casually, "Did you go anywhere after work today?" He looked up from his laptop, unbothered. Just stopped for gas. Why? Gas. Not coffee. Not her. That was the moment something inside me switched. I wasn't just suspicious anymore, I was on a mission. The next few days were a blur of fake smiles and restless nights. Sophie was excited for Christmas morning, and I refused to let my fear ruin her joy. But every time Mark looked at me, I saw flashes of that woman's face. On Christmas Eve, I decided to find the truth. Mark said he had to run to the store to grab one last gift. I waited until he drove off, then bundled Sophie into the car and told her we were going on a Christmas adventure. My plan was simple: follow him. The snow was falling gently, glittering under the streetlights as I tailed his truck down Route 422. He turned off near the old mill road, not toward the mall, not toward any store I knew. My pulse quickened as he pulled into a small cul-de-sac lined with modest townhouses. I parked a few houses down and watched. He got out, carrying a large wrapped box. He walked confidently up to one of the houses, number 27, and knocked. A boy, maybe 6 years old, opened the door. Then she appeared. The woman from the coffee shop. She smiled warmly and kissed Mark on the cheek, this time not on the sidewalk, not a quick goodbye, but like someone greeting a husband coming home. Sophie, in the back seat, whispered, "That's the house I told you about, Mommy." I felt my breath catch. I could have driven away. I could have told myself I misunderstood. But I didn't. I sat there, watching through tears as my husband, the man I built my life around, carried gifts inside another family's home. When he didn't come back out after 10 minutes, I put the car in drive and left. Sophie had fallen asleep, her small face peaceful in the back seat. I drove home in silence, the radio playing "Silent Night," as if mocking me. That night, when Mark came back around 10:30, I pretended to be asleep. He slipped into bed beside me, whispering, "Merry Christmas, baby," and I nearly laughed out loud. Merry Christmas. I knew I couldn't confront him yet. Not with Sophie asleep down the hall. Not without proof. But inside me, something broke that night. The perfect Christmas lights outside our window blurred as tears filled my eyes. And for the first time in 11 years, I realized, maybe I never really knew the man lying next to me. Christmas morning used to be my favorite day of the year. I'd wake up early, make hot cocoa, and watch Sophie tear through her presents while Mark filmed her with that proud dad grin. But this time, my stomach was in knots. Every glance at Mark felt like staring at a stranger wearing my husband's face. He acted normal, too normal. Laughing, joking, helping Sophie assemble her new dollhouse. When our daughter ran to grab her next gift, he turned to me and said, "Hey, thank you for this year. I know it's been stressful. But I think next year will be even better." I smiled weakly. Next year? I wanted to scream, "Next year? When you'll spend half your time with your other family?" But I stayed quiet. Because part of me still needed to know why. That night, after Sophie fell asleep, I couldn't hold it in any longer. I walked into the living room, where Mark sat sipping whiskey by the fire, scrolling his phone. "Who is she?" I asked. His head snapped up. "What?" "The woman. The one with the little boy. The one you spent Christmas Eve with." For a second, he didn't say anything. Just blinked, slow, calculating, caught. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said finally. I laughed, sharp and bitter. "Don't insult me, Mark. I followed you. I saw you go into that house. I saw her. And the boy." He stood, running a hand through his hair. "Jesus, Sarah. Don't, Jesus, Sarah, me. Just tell me who they are." He didn't answer. I could hear the grandfather clock ticking behind me. Each second stretched longer, louder. Then, finally, he said, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." Something in my chest twisted. "Find out what, exactly?" "That you've been living a double life? That my husband has another woman and a son?" He sat down, rubbing his temples. "It's not what you think." I almost laughed again. "Really?" "Because from where I'm standing, it's exactly what it looks like." "She's not, it's not about her," he said quietly. "The boy is, he's mine." The world tilted. My knees went weak. "Yours?" He nodded, eyes down. "Before you and I got serious." Before we got married. I didn't know about him until last year. She reached out. I stared at him, trying to process it. And you didn't tell me? He shook his head. I wanted to. But she didn't want anything from me except that I meet him. Just once. Then it became a few times a year. Birthdays. Christmas. I swear, Sarah, it's not romantic. It's just complicated. I could feel my heart cracking open. You've been lying to me for a year, I said, voice trembling. Keeping a whole child a secret. You let our daughter think she was your only one. She is my only one, he said, stepping closer. You and Sophie are my family. No, I whispered. We were your family. He looked at me like a man drowning. I didn't want to lose you. But you already did, I said. The days that followed were a blur of silent meals and muffled sobs in the bathroom. Sophie sensed something was wrong, kids always do. She started asking, why is Daddy sleeping on the couch? I told her Daddy was sick. But really, it was me who felt sick. Sick from betrayal, from trying to hold it together while my world crumbled. I told myself I needed space, time to think. But curiosity, that poisonous, relentless part of me, wouldn't let go. So one afternoon, while Mark was at work, I drove back to that townhouse. Number 27. I parked down the street again, heart racing, palms slick on the steering wheel. I didn't know what I planned to do. Maybe just see them again. Maybe understand the truth for myself. When I knocked, the woman opened the door. She looked surprised but not scared, as if she'd been expecting this day. Hi, she said softly. You must be Sarah. I froze. You know who I am? She nodded. Mark told me you'd find out eventually. I wanted to be angry, to scream, to call her names, but instead, I just felt tired. Can I come in? I asked. She stepped aside. The inside was cozy, warm lights, toys scattered across the floor, a small Christmas tree still lit in the corner. The boy, brown-haired, wide-eyed, peeked at me from behind the couch. He couldn't have been more than 6. This is Jacob, she said gently. Mark's son. I swallowed hard. You said you didn't want anything from him. She shook her head. I didn't, not at first. But when Jacob started asking questions, I thought he deserved to know who his father was. I didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at her, this woman who'd unknowingly rewritten my life. She didn't look like a villain. She looked like someone who'd been surviving, too. Do you love him? I asked. Her eyes flickered with sadness. No. Not anymore. I just wanted my son to have a dad. That was the moment the tears came, not loud or dramatic, just quiet, exhausted tears. Because it hit me then, this wasn't a love affair. It was a life I never knew existed, overlapping mine like some tragic parallel universe. That night, I told Mark I'd been there. He didn't get angry. He just nodded, eyes hollow. You deserved the truth. I deserved it a year ago, I said. He didn't argue. He just whispered, I'm sorry. Sorry. 2 syllables that did nothing to fix the ruins around us. We agreed to take time apart, for the holidays, he said. I moved into my sister's guest room with Sophie, telling her we were just having a girls' sleepover week. But at night, when she fell asleep beside me, I stared at the ceiling and wondered how love, something that once felt so solid, could dissolve so completely. I'd built my entire world around him. Around us. Now, every Christmas song on the radio felt like a cruel joke. After moving in with my sister, I told myself it would just be for a few days, a temporary escape until Mark and I figured things out. But a few days turned into a week, and then another. Christmas melted into the new year, and every snowstorm felt like a reminder of everything frozen between us. My sister, Jenna, tried to help. He made a mistake, Sarah, she said one night while pouring us wine at her kitchen table. A huge one. But people mess up. Maybe there's a way back. I stared at the glass in my hand, watching the wine ripple. He didn't just mess up, Jen. He built a life behind my back. I don't even know who he is anymore. She sighed. Then you decide who you want to be now. It sounded like something out of a self-help book, but it stuck with me. For years, I defined myself as Mark's wife, Sophie's mom. I'd forgotten the me that existed before all that, the one who loved painting, who dreamed of opening her own art studio, who laughed easily. I wanted her back. Mark called every few days to check in about Sophie. He was polite, careful, never pushing. But one night, around mid-January, he asked, "Can we talk? Just us?" I almost said no. But something in his voice, weary, defeated, made me agree. We met at a small diner halfway between my sister's house and our old neighborhood. He looked older, like the weeks had added years to his face. When the waitress left our coffees, he said quietly, "I know there's no fixing this. But I need you to understand something." I stayed silent. When I found out about Jacob, I panicked. I thought if I told you, it would destroy us. And maybe that was selfish, but I wanted to protect what we had. By lying to me? I asked. Yes. Because I was afraid of losing you. I stared at him. You didn't protect us, Mark. You just delayed the collapse. He nodded slowly. I know. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The diner hum, clinking plates, soft country music, filled the space between us. Finally, he said, "He's a good kid, Sarah. You'd like him." That hit me harder than I expected. "Don't," I said quietly. "Don't make me feel guilty for not liking the child you hid from me." He looked down, ashamed. I wish you could see that it's not black and white. But it was, at least for me. When I left that night, the snow was falling again, thick and silent. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the flakes gather on the windshield. Somewhere in that endless white, I realized something brutal but true. Sometimes love doesn't end in fire, it just fades under the weight of too many secrets. February came. I focused on Sophie, on finding a rhythm. But every night, I'd lie awake replaying that Christmas Eve over and over. One evening, Sophie was coloring at the table when she asked, "Mommy, when is Daddy coming home?" I froze. "He's not coming home for a while, sweetheart." Did I do something bad? That broke me. I pulled her close and said, "No, baby. None of this is your fault." She nodded against my chest, her little hands clutching my sweater. "But Daddy said families should always stay together." My throat tightened. Sometimes even when people love each other, they can't stay together. But that doesn't mean we stop being a family. She looked up at me, confused. Then what are we? I didn't have an answer. A few days later, I got a call from Mark's number, but it wasn't him. It was her. "Sarah? It's Emily." Hearing her voice again sent a rush of heat up my neck. "Why are you calling me?" "It's about Mark," she said, her voice shaking. "He's in the hospital." My heart stopped. What happened? There was an accident. Car crash. He was driving home from work. I didn't even think. I grabbed my keys and drove straight to the hospital, barely remembering how I got there. When I walked into the emergency room, I saw her sitting in the waiting area, clutching Jacob. She stood when she saw me. "They're still with him," she said. "They said he's stable but, it's bad." We sat in silence, two women bound by the same man, both praying for him in our own way. When the doctor finally came out, I held my breath. "He's alive," he said. "But he's suffered internal bleeding. We need to monitor him closely." I nodded numbly. They let me see him for a moment. He was pale, hooked up to machines, his hand cold in mine. When his eyes fluttered open, the first thing he whispered was, "Sarah." I couldn't speak. "I'm sorry," he murmured. "For everything." "Don't," I said softly. "Just rest." He squeezed my hand weakly. "Take care of them, both of them." Them. That single word shattered something inside me all over again. He survived the surgery, but the damage was done, physically and emotionally. He couldn't go back to the life he had before. And honestly, neither could I. In the days that followed, I visited him less. Emily was there most of the time, with Jacob. I focused on Sophie, on keeping things steady for her. But at night, when the house was quiet, I'd think about that moment in the hospital, his hand in mine, his voice fading, and wonder if part of love is learning to let go before it kills you. One evening, I drove by our old house. The Christmas lights were still hanging, half fallen, blinking faintly in the wind. The wreath on the door had browned and wilted. It looked like a ghost of our life, something beautiful that couldn't survive the season. Winter stretched into March, and life began to find a strange, quiet rhythm. Mark was recovering, slowly, painfully. The doctors said he'd need months of therapy. Emily updated me occasionally, polite but distant. I could tell she was trying to keep boundaries, and I respected that. Sophie still asked about her dad every night. I let her video call him, even if it meant swallowing my pride. He'd light up every time her face appeared on the screen. "Hey, Peanut," he'd say, his voice fragile but full of love. "I'm so proud of you." Sometimes, when she hung up, I'd sit on the couch after she went to bed and replay his words in my head, not because I missed him, but because I missed the man I thought he was. One afternoon in late March, I got a call from the hospital again. "Mrs. Carter," the nurse said gently. "You should come in. It's Mark." When I arrived, I saw the look on the doctor's face before he even spoke. Mark had suffered a complication overnight, a blood clot they couldn't stop. He was gone before sunrise. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. It didn't matter how much pain he'd caused, love doesn't disappear just because it's bruised. Emily was already there, sitting beside his bed, holding Jacob's hand. The boy looked confused, too young to understand why everyone was crying. She stood when she saw me. "I didn't know if I should call you first," she whispered. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. For a long time, the two of us just stood there in silence, united by grief neither of us fully owned. The funeral was small, quiet, snow still lingering on the ground like the world itself hadn't thawed. I stood at the back with Sophie, holding her hand as people whispered condolences. Emily stood on the other side with Jacob. Our eyes met briefly. There was no hate anymore, just a tired kind of peace. When it was over, Sophie asked if we could stay a little longer. She walked up to the headstone, set down a small pine cone she'd decorated in glitter, and whispered, "Merry Christmas, Daddy." I turned away so she wouldn't see me cry. A few weeks later, I got an envelope in the mail. No return address, just my name written in Mark's handwriting. My heart started pounding before I even opened it. Inside was a letter. "Sarah. If you're reading this, it means I didn't get to say what I needed to in person. I don't deserve your forgiveness, but I need you to understand why I did what I did." When Emily told me about Jacob, I panicked. I thought I could balance both worlds, be a good man, a good father, without hurting anyone. I was wrong. I hurt everyone. You once told me love isn't about perfection, it's about showing up. You did that every day. I wish I had, too. Please don't let my mistakes define the rest of your life. You're stronger than you think. Tell Sophie her dad loved her more than anything. Tell her I was proud of her every day I got to be her father. And Sarah. I never stopped loving you. Not once. Mark. I must have read it 100 times. The ink was smudged in places, maybe from when he wrote it, maybe from my tears. It didn't fix anything. It didn't erase the lies or the pain. But it gave me something I hadn't realized I needed: closure. Spring came slowly that year. Sophie and I moved back into our house. I took down the old Christmas lights, replaced the wilted wreath, and opened the windows for the first time in months. One evening, Sophie sat at the kitchen table, drawing. She handed me a picture, 3 stick figures holding hands under a big red heart. "This is us," she said. "Me, you, and Daddy in heaven." I smiled through tears. "It's beautiful, sweetheart." And for the first time in a long while, I believed it. Because even though our story ended in heartbreak, there was still love, messy, imperfect, and real. That Christmas took everything from me, but it also taught me something I'll never forget. You can lose someone, and still find yourself again. Sometimes, love doesn't leave with the person who breaks your heart, it stays to remind you who you were before them. If this story touched your heart, hit that like and subscribe button, and share it with someone who still believes in love, even when it hurts. And tell me in the comments, would you forgive someone who kept a secret like this?